ready to build resiliency, create a healthy lifestyle, and overcome adversity with a warrior mindset. This is Define the Fight with Mariah Prussia.
Hey, welcome to Define the Fight. We are here today. We're going to be joining us today is Theo Fleury. He is an NHL standout. Clearly, he debuted in 1989. He played for Calgary Flames, New York Rangers, Chicago Blackhawks. He has such a diverse story, and what a lot of people see when it comes to professional athletes, they see how they perform, whether it is on the ice, whether it's in the cage, you name it. But what they don't see is the internal stuff that is going on in the locker room. So we are waiting for Theo to log in here, having a little technical difficulty. But you know what? That's the nature of the beast, and that's why we define the fight every single Monday. So not only is Theo a professional athlete, he is also an author of Playing with Fire and a motivational speaker. So what we're going to learn today is not only what he did on the ice, but what he has done throughout his life and how he utilized, as we've heard the term so many times, turning your pain into power or turning your pain into purpose. And I believe a lot of us have faced adversity, but it comes down to choices. What are those choices that you are going to make in life? Are you going to sit and live in that space? Are you going to own that space? And he clearly has done that. And, you know, I was listening to a variety of different interviews with Theo in the last day or two, which have been absolutely amazing. And just listening to his passion and the different things that he faced, I just couldn't even imagine. I mean, I've had my own different things when it comes to adversity, but not clearly to the extent and in multiple realms that he has. So from overcoming abuse, facing addiction, working through addiction. And as we know, when it comes to addiction, it's every single day. You take it one day at a time, and each day becomes then a success. So if you have not looked up Theo Fleury, I would highly recommend making sure that you look him up online. Look at some of the different games that he has played. He was the individual he played over 1,000 games in the NHL between 1989 and 2003. He was one of the smallest players of his generation. He played a physical style that often led to altercations. And, you know, I really want to hear one of those stories because, you know, being in the cage, being in the ring, but when you see them throw down in NHL, it's completely different. And it reminds me back to the movie of Slapshot when you're looking at the Hanson brothers. You know, I don't know if Theo was to the same extent or clearly more. He was 1 versus 3. So when Theo comes on, you guys, I want you to understand that if you are in a tough spot in life, what direction are you going to go with it? Are you going to sit there? Are you going to step forward? Or are you going to actually do the work? And when you do the work, it's amazing on how we can turn being a victim into a victor. But it takes literally one step at a time. So when we go into a break, you guys, when we come back, Theo is going to share different stories from clearly when he was in the NHL. He's going to share stories pertaining to his personal life and his upbringing. He mentioned in an interview about utilizing hockey as an escape from his home life. What does that mean? He will be defining and breaking down those different fights that he had as a small child, and then clearly how he works through things as an active adult. Sometimes you bounce through different things in life where you're defining what is technology. Sometimes it works for you. Sometimes it works against you. So what do? You find a solution. So Theo, I am so excited to have you on. I broke down different accolades throughout the first segment, but you know what? I'm so excited to have you on Define the Fight today because who better than an individual who has literally knocked it out on the ice, but then looking at the fact of being an author of Playing with Fire, motivational speaker, and really utilizing all of the different lessons of life that you've been faced with, facing adversity and overcoming them and utilizing them to help others persevere in life. So welcome to Define the Fight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Sorry about all the confusion.
Hey, you know what? It's the nature of the beast. It is, you know, so we're just going to roll with it, Theo. You know, you have...
all right. Sounds good.
I was looking at your different accolades and clearly the fact of when I was reading your height, okay, so I'm just going to throw it right there, 5'6", one of the smallest NHL players out there. It reminded me of Rudy, the movie Rudy, the football player. And again, everything that he had was stacked against him, the odds. But the mindset wasn't. He had the mindset, the will, and it sounds exactly like you had moving into the NHL.
Well, I probably had a little more talent than Rudy.
Well, yes.
But my, obviously my attitude was, the same. When I look at myself in the mirror, I don't see somebody who's 5'6". I see somebody who's willing to go to any length to be successful. And I worked extremely hard from a very young age. I had a dream and a goal. And, I remember, being a 6-year-old kid walking around my hometown of like 1,500 people, telling anybody that would listen, I'm going to play in the NHL someday. And they'd be kind of looking at me like, who is this kid? And I backed it up, like I said, with hard work. And, I would say, the first 10 years of me playing hockey, I was at the rink every day, 10, 12 hours a day, working on, the basic skills that it takes to, to play the game. So skating, shooting, passing. I was always at the rink. And, my mom often said to me, I'm just going to move your bed down to the rink because that's where you are. And, that's where I lived. And, I loved it from the very first time I stepped on the ice. And, that love of the game has never left me, for sure.
And the thing is, too, is like what most people don't recognize is you can train athletes in certain ways, right? You can teach them the fundamentals, but when it comes to the work ethic and the mindset, what was it for you? I mean, you're talking at age 6. What were those different pieces that really helped you develop who you are today? And then that, like I said, that determination, like, this is my goal. I don't care what anybody says. No one's going to defer me from it. I'm going to knock it out of the park, but I know that it requires work. What was that for you?
Well, it was what I was experiencing at home. Both my parents struggled with addiction. And so, whenever I was in that environment, there was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of drama, some violence. It just wasn't a good place for a kid to be. And so when I went to the rink, everything that I wasn't getting at home, I got, love, teammates, friendships, people looked after me, so, but I also, I didn't realize this until I actually read this particular person's book, but there's a book by a guy named Malcolm Gladwell called The Outliers. And as I was reading this book, there was a particular chapter in the book where he explained the 10,000 hour sort of philosophy. And basically what it says is, if we want to be the elite of the elite of the elite of the elite in whatever field we choose, we have to put in 10,000 hours of practice. So I started playing hockey when I was 5, and then I left home at 15 to pursue my professional hockey aspirations. And in those 10 years, I put in those 10,000 hours. So when I left home, I was basically an expert in hockey by the time I left home.
So you left at the age of 15. I'm curious in regards to what were your steps. When a 15-year-old, when I look at a 15-year-old, I've got a 12-year-old and an 18-year-old right now, and clearly this generation is different than past generations.
Yeah.
For you, what was that like, surviving the world at age 15? Or where did that take you, Theo? Living on your own?
Well, it basically took me to probably the darkest time of my life. The guy that discovered me, basically, I was drafted. We have a hockey league in Canada called the Canadian Hockey League, which is where all the best junior age players play, and it produces, I believe, 65% of all NHL players that play in the NHL. And so I was drafted by a team called the Winnipeg Warriors, and the guy that discovered me, basically they drafted me when I was 14, came to my house in the summertime, sat me and my parents around a kitchen table, basically said, we think Theo needs better competition, better coaching, et cetera, and we would love for him to move to Winnipeg. And so my parents knew what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be and what I wanted to pursue, and so they didn't hold me back, and so I moved to Winnipeg. And needless to say, that decision and choice would change me for the rest of my life, because over the next 2.5 years, that particular scout and coach that discovered me would rape me 150 times over that 2.5-year period. And so what I was left with was a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of anger, and a lot of resentment. And there really wasn't anybody that I could go to tell what was going on.
So you were basically left sitting there, not only in your emotions, but the fact of almost disbelief. And I want to throw out the fact of, too, for men to speak openly in regards to sexual assault or abuse. Now you start seeing it more so coming to the forefront. But in the past, it was almost like, nope, I can't. This is going to be a sign of weakness. I can't throw these different things out there. Plus, too, shame. How did
the first thing, I knew that I wouldn't be believed. And then second of all, I knew that my hockey career would be finished, right? Because I would be deemed a troublemaker, a liar, all these things. And so basically, I kept this secret inside for, 27 years. And, I shortly or quickly after that, I got involved in alcohol, and then, everybody knows what happens, once you add alcohol, and then you start to, experiment with street drugs and, all this stuff. And so, I became a very high functioning, alcoholic and drug addict, but still, managed to have an amazing hockey career despite the fact that, I was using alcohol and drugs as a coping mechanism to suppress, all the emotional pain and scars that were left behind, first from my parents, and then secondly of my, my sexual abuse.
And from all the different things that you've experienced, you were able to recognize at some point that God or whoever you believe in, Theo, placed you in placed you in different spots where it's like, okay, now I have a purpose. I don't want anyone else to ever experience what I've experienced. I want them to be able to share and release some of those things and define different ways of coping. I've experienced sexual assault too in the past, Theo. And what I can say is this: there's a lot of second guessing that goes on in your mind. It's like these different things of, did I do something? Did I not? Maybe you did not experience that in your head, but I did. And we can't compare one another's trauma because trauma is trauma. But one thing that we can do is look at what is that tipping point of where you either live in that space or you own the space. And for you, like you said, you held yourself captive for what, 27 years?
Yep.
What was that piece for? What was that? Go ahead, Theo.
Well, I'd had a failed suicide attempt in like 2004. I had a fully loaded pistol in my mouth. ready to pull the trigger and end my life, not because I wanted to die, but because I was completely exhausted from, living in emotional pain and suffering for the majority of my life. And I tried everything on the planet to get rid of it, and, couldn't pull the trigger, which then, because I had two choices that day. Was I going to live or was I going to die? Well, I couldn't pull the trigger, so I chose to live. But guess what? I have no clue how to live life on life's terms, right? And then, I'd been by that time I'd been in and out of 12-step groups for quite a long time, and had achieved, different levels of sobriety, but, really wasn't ready to make that commitment. And September 17th of 2005, I was in a washroom on my hands and knees, and I just finished punching, I think, 7 holes in the wall. And I knew I was going to die, but not a quick death. I was going to die the alcoholic death, which is, the lonely, painful, resentful, angry sort of death. That's where I was headed. And I knew that, I was better than what I was showing the world. And, that's when I reached out to God, and I surrendered that night, and I turned my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand him. And that was September 18th of 2005, and I've been clean and sober ever since. So, to me, anybody who's struggling with anything, whether that's trauma, whether that's mental health, whether that's addiction, I think the first step is, that surrender piece. And for me, I was ready to make the commitment, and subsequently, the last almost 19 years that I've been sober, God has shown me purpose, and has put some amazing opportunities and experiences in my path, one of those being education around the subject of trauma, mental health, and addiction. And so basically I've spent the last 19 years telling my story and, facilitating healing and coaching healing and speaking, as well. I think I've done like 900 speeches since 2009 when my autobiography came out, Playing with Fire. I've basically been submersed, which I believe is the biggest epidemic on the planet, and that is unresolved trauma.
Theo, before the break, we were speaking about surrendering, and what does that look like for you, surrendering into your faith from addiction, overcoming sexual abuse, which still stays with an individual, but at the same point, at what point are you going to say, I am no longer giving this power? So Theo, let's talk about surrendering for you. Clearly there's a lot of years that were pent up, but where are you at now, and what work did it take?
Well, it took a tremendous amount of hard work, probably harder work than, the first half of my life that, made me a successful, NHL hockey player. This is a different kind of work. This is emotional, spiritual, work. And I often stand on stage and tell people that, I'm in therapy for the rest of my life. And I'm completely okay with that, because every time I enter into a therapeutic process, even though it's uncomfortable and not everybody wants to do it, I continually get better and better. And And so, the surrender piece is giving up complete and every aspect of your life. I always make this sort of statement as well, is that left to my own defenses and left me running my own life is the biggest gong show on the planet. Or every time I drive the bus always crashes. And so surrender means, to me, is getting in the passenger seat and trusting that God has a plan, and his plan always has some sort of purpose, connected to it. And for me, that has played out for the last 19 years, is that I've been submersed in the biggest epidemic on the planet, which I said earlier is unresolved trauma. And I believe that at the core of every single issue we have in society starts with unresolved trauma. And then you pick your coping mechanism. But eventually, those coping mechanisms stop to work. And then because by that time you've burned up every single relationship, nobody trusts you, and you're basically alone. And so when you're alone, there's really only one entity that you can reach out to, and that's, this higher power, God, or whatever you choose to call it. And it's that process or that exercise that, usually gets you to stop the use of coping mechanisms and really pushes you in the direction of facing your old trauma and somehow getting it resolved to where you can have peace, joy, happiness, and serenity in your life. Because I really believe that that's the ultimate goal in this process, is to get to some sort of peace, happiness, joy, serenity. That's where we need to get to. And until we actually, start to deal, with the trauma, or, sitting in uncomfortability is part of the process, but not everybody wants to do that. And, I've become sort of an expert at, sitting in uncomfortability, because I understand the process, and the reason why we have to sit in uncomfortability is because for the majority of our life, we ran away from our feelings, and we couldn't even identify whether we were happy, sad, mad, or glad. You know what I mean? And so I understand that part of the process of healing is sitting in anger, sitting in sadness, sitting in depression, sitting in anxiety, you know what I mean? And so, but, it's taken me a long time to realize that, but I also understand that it's definitely part of the process.
There was an individual who is an amazing speaker, retired Navy SEAL, Jason Redman, had don't sit on the X, right? So it's important to understand and identify what is that emotion and where is it stemming from instead of bearing it. But don't sit on the X so long that you become so consumed with that emotion that you're not willing to face or work through it. And you had mentioned, too, it's like identifying emotions. Most people think good, fine, okay are emotions, but when you start peeling back those layers, like those aren't emotions, those are just responses. That's not really what's going on, and it's easy to push that and put a smile on your face and carry on. And then, too, you were talking about sitting in the driver's seat. With an individual that I'm working with, too, she made a comment of working at peace pace, which was one of the most beautiful terms I've ever heard, is peace pace. We try to push things, right? How fast can we move this into fruition? But the reality is it's God's will. And if you're in your peace, and he's going to guide you in that pace, and we have to collect those different intricate pieces of who we are, before we step onto that next stage of life. So when, you're talking about speaking, coaching, different healing modalities that you're providing that you've also had, it was really eye-opening to hear peace, pace. And for you, do you feel like you've really shifted so that you're not forcing and hammering down the accelerator, that you're like, no, I'm at that peace pace where you're still actively working, but allowing?
Yeah. Well, I'm also an addict, right? So I know how to very quickly, move out of feelings of uncomfortability, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to healing, it's like you said, it's on God's time, right? And so, yeah, I don't get too overwhelmed anymore when, I have periods of depression or anxiety or, whatever big pharma label they want to attach to me,
Right.
but, I have a toolbox that's full of all of like amazing things, like all the modalities I've been through. I love to play golf, in the summertime. Like I'm the happiest probably at any point during the year. It's when, the sun's shining, I'm outdoors, I'm putting my feet in the grass, I'm hugging trees, I'm
Grounding.
just at peace, grounding, earthing, whatever you want to call it. Right. So these are part of my toolbox now, whereas my old toolbox was just filled with, addiction, drugs, alcohol, food, sex, gambling, like I belong to all the A groups, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because,
I gotcha.
I had all those, you know what I mean? I had all those coping mechanisms, but now, I listen to frequency, I do light and sound therapy. Like there's so many incredible modalities out there that nobody really knows about because big pharma has taught us that there's a pill
For everything.
for every ailment. And basically, I went down that road. It's a pretty ugly, disgusting path. And then once God showed me all of these new modalities, I was like, oh my God, like this. And it resonated, like it resonated with me where my body was like, yes, this is, so I've been able to become really attuned to what my body needs, what my emotional health needs, all this stuff. And so I'm very aware when I'm presented with a new modality that I can tell if it's going to resonate and it's going to help with me because, that's just part of the process of being sober for as long as I've been. I'm very attuned into, what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, finding out what is in alignment with your soul, but also your energy and frequencies. I love the fact that you have dove into a bunch of different modalities because there's a lot of energy work that people aren't aware of. And two, it's not a quick fix. If we're looking for a quick fix, we're going to have a quick fall. And when you're talking about big pharma, there is a pill for every single thing. And sometimes I'm like, I've never even heard of this thing. And then all of a sudden there's a pill for it. So what I can say to the individuals that are listening today is also look at the adverse effects. Listen to the commercials on a deeper level. You'll have people that are dancing, singing, smiling on the commercials. But then all of a sudden you hear all these different things that are like, and death, leaky bowel, all these different components that come with it. So what I can say before we go into the break here, Theo, is do the work because you're going to appreciate it later. If it's something quick, again, it's going to revert back to that quick fall. So Theo, you have a book that is out, which is Playing with Fire. I would love for you to share what is Playing with Fire about. And then also, too, we're going to dive into ways that individuals can learn more about what you're currently doing and how to connect. So let's play with fire, Theo.
So basically, that secret that I was carrying around for 27 years, that was basically the confession where I told the whole entire story to the world. and obviously there was some hockey in it and stuff, but it was basically all about my life, and I talked about my family of origin trauma. I talked about my sexual abuse, and then started talking about the healing that I was doing, and then I followed it up with another book called Conversations with a Rattlesnake, who I wrote with a lady who's an occupational therapist who has a degree in neuroscience, and it's called Conversations with a Rattlesnake. And basically, it's considered one of the greatest books ever written on the theory of attachment. And so, between the two books, it's been a pretty incredible experience, this healing journey, and, now becoming a speaker, facilitator, all these things. But really what happened was, when the book first came out, the first group that reached out to me was the Indigenous community, and I'm an Indigenous person myself, and so I went there to help them, but it reversed on me, because what they did is they introduced me to spirituality. And so, I started doing a lot of ceremony, sweat lodge, drumming, smudging, going to powwows, sun dances, all these things. And then my spiritual part of my life just went to a whole new dimension, a whole new level. And that's kind of where I've kind of grooved for the last, 15 years. And I believe I believe that the Indigenous communities all over the world, have the greatest untapped resource of medicine on the planet. And it's just been an incredible journey. I hang around with one of the most powerful medicine men on the planet, and I've learned so much from him. And so now I'm an honorary chief. I'm a pipe carrier, and I live a very simple, sort of basic spiritual life.
It's beautiful, and I agree with you when it comes to Indigenous and how they treat the land. We need to start shifting back to natural ways and healing the soil, healing our souls, and it all correlates with all of the different things that we've been compacted with when, especially when COVID hit. It really knocked on people's mental health, physical health, and well-being. And you see, you're speaking about different ceremonies. I went through a tie cutting ceremony when I went and taught self-defense at one of the reservations. And it was unbelievable, just the different ways of looking at things. Living on a farm now is, I want to have different ceremonies on the farm because I want individuals to be able to connect and experience, because we get trapped in this box of this is how it should be. And we're just going to go on our phone. We're going to do these different things. And we don't go to a deeper level of spirituality. And I think as we start opening those different gifts, because that's what they are, and understanding who we are in the connectability of ourselves with one another, but then also the land, that's really when things start shifting and pivoting within the world.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. And, their teachings they're so healing. Like, it's, to experience the sweat lodge, I remember my first sweat lodge, and I was just like, oh my God, like, where have you been all my life,
Right. Yeah.
And I just felt so close to the Creator. And at that moment, I knew that, this particular ceremony was going to be part of my toolbox. I was going to put that in my toolbox, and I try to get to one at least once a month. And like I said, I've done some incredible healing in the sweat lodge, and obviously with a great teacher that I have, it's an incredible experience.
Well, you are blessed, and we are blessed to be able to have you on to hear your story. How can individuals clearly find or connect with you, Theo? I know you've got your book. So if individuals want to go online looking for Playing with Fire and then Conversations with Rattlesnakes, but if they're looking for more of the coaching, the healing, the education, how can individuals find you?
Yeah, just go to my website, Theo Fleury, TheoFleury.life. And then I'm on all social media platforms at Theo Fleury 14. And I always say when I have the opportunity, if you are out there and you have nobody to talk to, please send me a private message on social media, and I guarantee I will get back to you within 30 minutes.
Beautiful. Well, Theo, thank you for being a light for those who might have their light off right now, because we need more light workers in this day and age. And again, life is all about connecting with one another and shining that light so that we can uplift each other in mind, body, and spirit. So thank you again for coming on Define the Fight.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for reaching out and asking me to. So.
You got it. So everybody right now, what I challenge you to do is look at different healing modalities. If you are struggling, which many of us are, research. Look for different ways to heal and open your mind, your body, and your spirit to really owning and defining that fight. So have a great Monday, and we will see you next week.